You're listening to the Black Sheep and Bad Apples podcast.
Welcome back to the show. You guys at home and here in the studio are listening to Black Sheep and Bad Apples. I'm your host, Loren O'Brien, and this is the podcast where we write a story, more or less sober, and deliver them in various states of inebriation. And I am proud to say that I am high as shit on a 5-hour energy because I was very tired this week from work.
Liquid crack.
Liquid crack. And with us, as you've heard, Sam.
I'm back, baby.
You're back, baby. Thank you for being here with us. And as usual, our Mr. Producer Man, Shawn Hill.
No.
Our Dr. Dre.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And then we've got somebody special with us tonight.
I'm not special.
Ron Baca.
Baby Ron.
Come on.
He got the cheeks.
Such a pleasant warming.
Technically, you do ride on the short bus.
Yeah, we all ride on the short bus.
Yeah,
I didn't want to.
For those at home
Transit
to know,
van.
we own a short bus with
So
the
we're
van.
all
Transit
You're
Shawn,
special like the
van.
rest of us.
Yeah.
Oh. Oh. Be still my beating heart.
So how are you guys feeling about tonight?
Ooh, I am super excited for historical naval.
Some Navy stuff, baby.
All sorts of wooden ships and cannons. Yeah, let's do this. Piracy, because that's what a lot of this stuff is.
Yeah.
Really, privateering. Love it.
What about you, Shawn?
I'm numb to everything.
Cool. Very optimistic.
Valium.
And, yeah, it's like Shawn is just like on like a benzo or something. He's like, I'm not one way or the other about it. It's gonna be terrible. So,
I've been drinking.
Life's terrible, but that's what makes it so.
It's what happens, dude.
Are you trying to steal Ron's fucking thing?
Yeah. Speaking of Ron,
I was beating him to the punch.
how are you doing tonight?
Oh,
with
his eyes twitched.
Your eye twitch.
You mean to tell me this is about war?
This is
And then
about
we're
war
gonna
tonight.
talk about ships sinking?
Yes.
Oh, welcome
But it's
to
like
my life.
European. It's like European war, like Enlightenment war.
And these are
they were just fighting. It was just a constant thing. For
Yeah,
them.
and
Oh,
they were like
sinking ships
but
for a
learning.
cause.
they were part of like the Christian pioneer, like the kind of colonialization part of what we're going to talk about, and like fuck them for that matter.
Let's be real. Europe was like a bunch of fucking gangs
Yeah.
with like egomaniacs for leaders, having pissing contests with each other.
It's exactly
for
that.
500 fucking years. We're gonna just touch on like a little
Yeah.
piece of that part,
Yeah,
like
let's-
a little tiny little itty bitty bit of that.
Yeah. So without further ado,
It's always war with Europe in the fucking
it really is,
1900s.
yeah.
Like-
And so tonight we'll be talking about the War of Jenkins Ear, and this was a colonial war during the 1700s that just ravaged the landscape of the Caribbean and kind of set the stage for the world that we grew up in, and also it's going to kind of set the stage for our next episode. However, in order for us to really understand like the Caribbean as it is now and back then, I think it's important to set up a little bit of an understanding of how these peoples lived and how incredibly vulnerable they were against advanced European powers. So tonight we're going to start off our story with a little bit of a long, long time ago, and then we're going to kind of work our way into Jenkins' Ear. So,
Wait, was that
Pitch it like
Bill
Star Wars.
McLean?
what are you trying to say,
Long,
Sam?
long time ago.
Oh, I thought it was just a
still
nice...
Remember when?
I don't know what you're referencing.
What was that guy's name?
The American Pie.
McLean, something McLean. Don McLean.
Oh, there it is. I just found it. And so, for an extremely long time...
Ago.
For an extremely long
galaxy.
time, what the Europeans would end up calling the New World was an unmolested landscape with robust cultures, traditions, and beliefs. And the New World was the name for what we now know, obviously, is the Americas, and it's like the northern, central, and southern
Good
America.
place to send your prisoners.
I still know it as the New World.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah. We don't say America. We
hear
say New World.
Yeah, we are voting for a part of the New World, actually.
One World Party.
One World Party. And so these places were amazingly resource rich, and they were they were a world without modernized people. The people in this new world were fascinatingly different than the Europeans, who would later come and destroy them with disease and war. And so, after the Holocene glacial retreat, about 11,650 years ago, the archaeological evidence suggests the first group of people to have settled in the Caribbean settled on the island of Trinidad, now known as Trinidad and Tobago, off the coast of Venezuela. And at this time, this island was still connected to the mainland via a land bridge,
Right.
But that later became submerged.
Right, because the oceans were 40 feet lower or something like that.
Yeah, something like that,
Because
yeah.
of the glacial fields and the poles.
Yeah.
Right.
And so the people of Tobago and later the Caribbean, they lived mostly as like small bands and sustained themselves on small game hunting and fishing and foraging. And they lived a mostly nomadic life. And as like they lived a nomadic life as we would see it. But they did have places that were like semi-permanent, and so like they would like build some of these cities and then come through. But they mostly stayed mobile due to
And it's
to
kind
take
of
advantage
it's
of
the wrong way of looking. We think of
seasonal changes,
like
yeah.
nomadic as anybody who doesn't come home at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But a bear doesn't think of himself as nomadic, even though he roams over like a vast territory.
Mm-hmm.
That's his home.
Sounds
Yeah,
like these
exactly.
bands built these cities.
I'm sorry.
Did they do it on
rock and
Shut that fuck up.
rocks that roll?
Please, God damn
It's funny that you mentioned that because I actually literally was reading this earlier today and it was like small bands. I bet somebody's going to make that joke. Should I change it? No, I'm not going to change it.
We'll leave it for post.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, I'm post.
Yeah, you're in post,
We
Sean.
built these cities
on
rock,
and
stone,
stones.
tools.
Rocks and stones, baby. And so, yeah, they mostly stayed mobile, even though they had these like semi-permanent cities. And it was just because of the various seasons, one would assume. There's evidence that
Different camps.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
The seasonal camps. The buffalo are here at this point in the year,
Yeah.
and we like to stay at this spot in the river.
yeah, exactly. And this is
It's
still in the
nice.
Caribbean, so I don't know what.
But it's the same.
Yeah, it's the same
mentality.
mentality. And there's also evidence that several thousand years after the Holocene glacial retreat, during what some archaeologists call the archaic age of Caribbean history, and that's kind of a controversial thing in the archaeology world.
It's where all the voodoo comes from.
Yeah, and it was after the Holocene glacial retreat that the other Caribbean islands gradually began to become like what we see as kind of settled. Islands like Barbados, Cuba, Curacao, Puerto Rico, and some of these islands, just to name a few. Fast forward a little bit to like between 800 and 200 BCE, when there actually became a new migratory group into the Caribbean named the Saladoid, and they emerged as a culture near the Orinoco River in Venezuela. And the Saladoid, between 400 and 1 BCE, migrated up through the southeastern islands of the Caribbean, like kind of along from like South America through those side islands.
Were these islanders that like canoed across the Pacific and landed on like the west coast of South America and like their culture
yeah.
crossed over? Like
Yeah.
they didn't come from the Russian, Chino.
Yeah. They came from like
Sino-Russian.
Yeah, and these particular people.
Land bridge connection.
Yeah.
It was a different culture that came by water.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And that's what it's suggesting, but again, there's not a whole lot of evidence. And,
None of us were there.
Yeah, and so essentially they started off in like Venezuela, and eventually they were found in like the Caribbean. And so during 400 BCE and 1 BCE, the Saladoid migrated up through the southeastern islands of the Caribbean, and they eventually moved as far north as Cuba and Puerto Rico, which is like a significant way to move up. And so it sounded like they were kind of island hoppers.
In a canoe, yeah.
Yeah, but it's it's a little hard to judge.
I mean, when you look on a map, they don't seem that far apart.
Yeah, and like the
People
common,
literally floated from Cuba to Florida on like inner tubes.
Yeah, so I mean, everything suggests that there's no way of saying that officially, you know.
No, I'm just mean it's not so far.
No.
It's not the vast distance like to think of some Pacific Islanders deciding, hey, let's get into our outrigger canoe
Yeah.
and head towards the rising sun into the vast emptiness of the ocean.
Yeah.
And then they made it to South America.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? That is a... I can't comprehend that feat.
Well, and also, you know, we think of these kind of people as like kind of more primitive and stuff like that, but they were actually going through the same experiences that we were as like Europeans at the time. You know, they were trying to figure out how to sail farther, find new lands, do new discoveries, because these were exciting things.
They were being typical people.
Yeah, they were being just regular people.
Normal people. So I have to think that people have gotten dumber, much dumber in the last 300 years for the simple fact that you don't have to be
Curious.
smart, curious, but smart. Like human evolution factors intelligence as well as strength. Those are the two, like strength and intelligence. Those are your two attributes that we use. We get the
Preach,
most,
brother.
Yeah.
we get the
Preach.
most work out of. So like the people that made it across the Pacific Ocean in a canoe might not have known how to like make a piece of paper even,
Or count
let alone a paper
numbers.
airplane or
Yeah.
do math. But that didn't make them less intelligent. And
Exactly.
you know what I mean? They were smart and strong, and that's why they got to do that.
Yeah, and so it's widely regarded that there was kind of three major groups that inhabited the Caribbean when the Europeans first made contact. I might butcher some of these names, so forgive me, listeners.
I promise you, everybody butchered them.
The Guanahatabes, they were also known as the Ciboney, Ciboney, but it's not very well. Like it was kind of a mistaken name to call them the Guanahatabes,
Like saying
whatever.
Eskimo.
Yeah, kind of.
Right.
Because and these two people occupied the western tip of what is now modern day Cuba. The Taino is sometimes called the Arawak, which was actually a language, not a people. But the Tainos or the Arawak at different times, they occupied the mainland of Cuba, the Bahamas, and at other times they occupied Haiti and the Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, and San Martin. And the final of these three major groups is the Caribs in Grenada and San Vicente and San Lucia. The indigenous peoples living on ostensibly their land, minding their business, living more or less a peaceful life.
Our land.
Our land, yeah, because it wasn't, according to the Europeans, it was their land, like that they had possession of it, but they didn't think of it like that. They didn't possess
That's mighty white of them.
mighty white of them. And they were kind of living a more or less peaceful life when the Europeans began exploring the New World. Now, the Italian asshole Christopher Columbus makes his way across the Atlantic, and his intention is basically to discover a seafaring route across the Atlantic to India. This would, 400 years later, come to fruition in the building of the Panama Canal, but that's a different story for a different time. Instead, he lands on the island that was named, at the time, Guanahani, which he quickly renamed San Salvador. Yeah. And this is
No. This does not have a European name.
Yeah, and literally, basically, everybody after him does the same thing on every Caribbean island, just for like 100 years or so, and it's wild.
Not for nothing. That's just what people do. I
Yeah.
guarantee you that when the South Pacific Islanders landed in South America in their canoes, they immediately named wherever they landed.
Yeah.
New whatever in their language.
Yeah,
You know what I
for
mean?
sure.
Like that's what we do. We like familiarity and we're deeply nostalgic.
And I think it also gives us a sense of like control over a region. Like if we can rename it, that gives us like this abstract feeling that now we've conquered it.
Right. Oh yeah, for sure.
And so
The planting of the flag.
Exactly. So this was in fact a pivotal moment for Europeans as well as world history. And hilariously, I would just like it noted that Christopher Columbus, until his last breaths, thought that he had discovered India and Asia.
Oh yeah.
So fuck Christopher Columbus. He can eat a bag of dicks. And I'm glad that he died. Just I'm glad he died just being convinced of something that is empirically
Wrong.
incorrect. Yeah, it makes me so pleased. And on the first island he landed on, did you have a thought, Sam? Did you have a thought?
I just wanted to like second that, but I realized that I did.
Yeah, and so on the first island that the Italian asshole landed on in the Caribbean, he wrote about the Taino in his journal, and he stated the following, quote, "Numbers of the people on the island straightway collected together. Here follow the precise words of the admiral." So now he's quoting the admiral. Quote, "As I saw that they were very friendly to us, and perceived that they could be much more easily converted to our holy faith by gentle means than force, I presented them with some red caps and strings of beads to wear upon the neck, and many other trifles of small value, wherewith they were very much delighted, and they became wonderfully attracted to us. Afterwards they came swimming to the boats, bringing parrots, balls of cotton thread, javelins, and many other things which they exchanged for articles we gave them, such as glass beads and hawk's bells, which trade was carried on with the utmost goodwill. But they seemed on the whole to me to be a very poor people. They all go completely naked, even the women, although I saw but one girl. All whom I saw were young, not above 30 years of age, well made, with fine shapes and faces, their hair short and coarse like that of a horse's tail."
So, like, clothes are like a class value at this point?
For the
In
Europeans,
European society,
yeah,
for
very
sure.
much so.
What the fuck, man?
Are you
but
kidding me? Why do you think that
The
we-
nakedest
that's why-
people are the richest of us all.
Yeah.
Come on.
Well, and they get to walk around naked. Like,
But this is why
Freedom.
This is why
It's a large kitchen.
people in European society and people all over the world oftentimes show their value by wearing it in some
Yeah.
way or another, be it scarification, tattoo, whatever. They wear their value. And European society, because it's cold in fucking Europe, wear clothes.
yeah.
So, like, the king has the nicest clothes. Everybody copies the king's
But it's
clothes.
hot as shit down here.
When you see some dude in a really nice suit, you're like, that guy obviously, you immediately make a fucking social judgment value about the dude in the three-piece suit with
Yeah.
the nice shoes and
And-
shit. You're like, that guy has got money.
And so the funny thing here too is that like these
Wearing his value.
is that these colonial, imperials, that they look at these people and they're like, they don't have clothes, they must be poor. But it's like the freedom to be naked. Holy shit, they are the richest people on the planet.
They literally live in paradise.
Yeah. So we're gonna keep quoting from Christopher Columbus's quote from his admiral. Their hair short and coarse like that of a horse's tail, combed forward the forehead, except a small portion which they suffer to hang down behind, and never cut. Some paint themselves with black, which makes them appear like those of the Canaries, neither black nor white. Others with white, others with red, and others with such colors as they can find. Some paint the face, and some the whole body, others only the eyes, others the nose. So he's talking like this is what you were talking about just a moment ago. Like they paint themselves in
They
order
just didn't understand the cultural value that the paint had.
yeah.
So they were like, all these people are poor.
Yeah, they're poor.
Oh, look at
and-
he's covered in mud.
yeah.
Well, it turns out you can only get that mud if you climb up this fucking cliff.
And grab the iron
and only
oxide
the-
red,
Yeah, only the best warriors, the strongest warriors can do that. Whatever.
The
I'm
reflective
saying.
properties too, right? Like,
Yeah, yeah.
So like sports people, like they fucking have the eye
absolutely.
paint, right?
Yeah.
To
Dude,
reflect
look at the elephant.
sunlight away from them, so they don't fucking blur their vision.
Look at
whatever way.
elephants or pigs. If you want to see how like something that isn't a human deals with having skin
Yeah.
is exposed to the hot sun.
And listeners
they
at
cover
home-
themselves in mud.
Listeners at home, I just want to let you know if you ever stuck out in the middle of the woods and like the bugs are getting to you and like you're gonna have a hard time, literally take mud and rub it over your body. It'll protect you from mosquitoes. It'll help block sunburns and stuff like that.
If you have to walk through the sun naked for some god awful reason, try
Find
to
mud.
cover yourself in mud.
Yep.
So
So,
save your fucking life.
Continuing in the journal, quote, "Weapons, they have none." And it sounds like a Charlie Day quote, but weapons, they have none, nor are acquainted with them. For I showed them swords, which they grasped by the blades, and cut themselves through ignorance. They have no iron, their javelins being without it, and nothing more than sticks. though some have fish bones or other things at the end, because they probably didn't need a whole lot more than that. They're of all good size, and this is where it gets really weird. They are all of good size and stature, and handsomely formed. I saw some with scars of wounds upon their body, and demanded by signs by using weird hands. Demanding by signs of them, which is just a literal thing from the journal. They answered me in the same way, that there came some people from the other islands in the neighborhood who endeavored to make prisoners of them, and they defended themselves. I thought then, and still believe, that these were from the continent. It appears to me that the people are ingenious and would be good servants, and I am of the opinion that they would very readily become Christians, as they appear to have no religion. They very quickly learn such words as are spoken to them. If it pleases our Lord, I intend at my return to carry home 6 of them to your highnesses, that they may learn our language. I saw no beasts in the island, nor any sort of animals except parrots. These are the words of the admiral. End quote.
I feel like that just proves, not proves, but it adds to what I said before. Like, a Neolithic society required strength and intelligence.
Yeah.
They're like, these people were well formed. That means handsome, beautiful, fit. And they quickly through hand gestures, explained something so complex that somebody tried to come and take us as slaves.
And we were like, nah.
We rebuffed their effort.
Yeah.
Is that the birth of ASL, though?
I mean, you could argue that...
Or maybe not American Sign Language.
Yeah.
But sign language
you could argue that we've been doing that kind of communication for a long time, and ASL is actually the written version, if you will, of our spoken word. So we've now standardized it and created it as a thing. Yeah,
version
whereas of their interaction,
typical.
of the interaction that these people had with the indigenous.
Outside of the like alphabet of ASL, a lot of the actual fucking signs for words or statements are pretty fucking straight. Like, they're intuitive. They're not. It's not some complex thing. No, it's
more body language.
Well, it's like poop.
It's really
poop in sign language is you take your thumb on one hand and then wrap your other fist around that thumb, and then you just pull down with the thumb, and it's just literally poop coming out of a butthole. So I think it's pretty easy to translate.
You heard it here first.
The most basic. I or me.
Yeah.
A splayed palm to the
chest.
Center of your chest.
Yeah.
That is the oldest piece of sign language ever.
Yeah. You is pointing. Me is hand. Yeah.
No one ever would
The
miss
listeners
that.
can't see that, Sam.
No, I know, but I'm pointing at Ron and I'm putting my hand on my chest.
So they
me.
saw this and thought, these people, man, they need Jesus.
That's exactly what they thought.
Religion.
Well, I mean, almost every European thought that anybody who didn't have Jesus needed it
and at the
in
age
some
of,
form or
and
another.
at the age of Christopher Columbus, I'm pretty sure that the church actually ruled as like a... And I might be wrong about that. It could be...
No, so what was that,
1492?
So actually, the book that... The Swerve, I always talk about this book hunter from the early 1400s. So yes, was Europe very religious at the time? Certainly, but there was also definitely an aspect of that was just the society. So, we joke on American society. People had a laissez-faire attitude towards the Roman Catholic religious structure or the Church of England.
Yeah.
As well. These are power structures. Nothing more.
And I think it goes into if you're going to be a good politician, you've got to have Christ in your heart, because it really bumps up your PR imagery.
There's never been a president that didn't praise God.
Yeah. So I want to get back into Christopher Columbus because what he said in when he touched down on there, that was basically the start of European expansion, as we all know, all you guys listening know, into the New World. And immediately after Columbus, who found that the natives had gold, the Portuguese and Spanish, and almost certainly every other European nation who seafared, sent out expeditions, began claiming territories in the Caribbean, and they eventually were just establishing colonies. These colonies eventually expanded, and soon the battles for control over the Americas began. In fact, possession of the islands had changed hands frequently, and this happened all the time, like on the mainland and in these islands, and so they were constantly just bouncing around. People were always just fucking each other up back then.
Yeah, whoever had the most ready guns at any singular geographical point was in charge of it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and so there were many
Flags
groups.
are raised.
Yeah, there were many groups who voyaged into the Caribbean, but the main colonial powers that established themselves there were the Spanish, English, Dutch, and French. The Portuguese, Swedish, and Danish also held possession of various lands, but for the sake of our story tonight, they're not gonna hold any real importance. And so you guys listening may know that there was just constant war on the seas. And one of those wars was the War of Jenkins Ear.
Oh, yeah.
Poor old Jenkins. This started as a simple request from a captain to get what amounts to revenge for having his ear cut off during a search by the Spanish.
Pirate captain.
But the political climate of the time makes this particular interaction very similar to the killing of Archduke Franz Ferdinand in the 1990s. Master Mariner Robert Jenkins was...
1990s?
1900s. I keep doing that.
Yeah.
You guys at
Like,
home,
bro,
I'm sorry.
you are jumping.
I've got dyscalculia. I read numbers and say them differently.
Early
so
1900s,
They're
yes.
still killing stirs.
I need to write out the words instead of the numbers.
It's an ignition point for
Dyscalculia.
Right. The Archduke of Austria wasn't all that important as far as the world's concerned, but he was super important
in regards to
insofar as starting a war.
A big ass story, yeah. And so Master Mariner Robert Jenkins was the captain of a British mercantile ship named Rebecca, and this was in the April of 1731. He was offshore of Havana, Cuba, when a Spanish Coast Guard ship, La Isabella, stopped them. Now, the Isabella was more of a privateer than a Coast Guard, and for just various reasons, they're stopped. Like, we don't know why they were stopped, but there's a lot of reasons why they could have been stopped, and suspicion of smuggling is the most widely accepted reason.
I believe that Captain Jenkins was also a privateer.
I believe that as well, but that's not how the story's necessarily told. And so, like, because the mercantile ship
I get that,
at the time was basically the same thing.
The story is mostly told from an English perspective.
Exactly, yeah.
It was really difficult for me to find stuff from a Spanish perspective on this.
Mm-hmm. And so, Captain of La Isabela, Juan de Leon Fandino, didn't care to... Yeah, Juan de Leon Fandino.
Juan de Leon Fandino.
What a name, dude. What a name.
It's a fucking mouthful.
Yeah, he didn't really care to hear Jenkins's explanation that they were finished trading in the Caribbean and they were taking their goods back to Britain. And Fandino didn't care, and he didn't care so much that he immediately had their ship stripped of its money and cargo. And so I'm going to read...
He robbed them.
I'm going to read from a history.net article about it. Quote, The Spaniard and crew began to strip Rebecca of its money and cargo. Then, in the words of Rear Admiral Charles Stewart, a British commander of the Jamaica station, in a complaint to the Spanish governor of Havana, and this is them quoting him, quote, After using Captain Jenkins's in a most barbarous and inhuman manner, Fandino cut off one of his ears, end quote. In one of the tellings of the incident, Fandino set the ship adrift upon taking his leave. It's alleged that Robert Jenkins, 7 years later, took his ear before a committee at the House of Commons and showed what he alleged was his own severed ear.
I bet it wasn't.
I honestly bet it wasn't too.
I bet the guy threw it over the fucking side of the ship.
But he cut off an ear of a
And
slave or something.
Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
Definitely.
Some fucking native's ear got presented.
Yeah, and it's yeah, the story is just
But that's
wild.
just my own.
Well,
That's my own jaded view of Europeans.
The editorialized of it.
White people in general.
I felt like I read a bunch that said it was like really up in the air on whether or not like it was just my ear got cut off and a story that got back, or he was like, yeah, it got cut off.
It was
or whether or not an ear was actually presented.
And we're gonna get to that here in a minute.
It was some time between when the incident happened, if I remember correctly. It was sometime between then and when the ear was presented before Parliament.
Yeah,
and that's what I'm saying is I
so
read
for
some
our-
stuff that
well-
said there was never actually an ear presented.
Well, and-
Do you
No,
think
no,
Parliament
I remember
like,
that
asked?
too.
Like,
Yeah.
maybe
So
it's just
we're
like,
gonna get to that here in a
see?
moment. Yeah.
Sorry, we're jumping his gun.
Yeah, but in order to tell the story of Jenkins's ear, we have to take note that it happens in two parallels. The parallels being Jenkins's story and the subsequent war in British politics. See, the British had already had other incidences with Spain,
Yes.
and it's safe to say that the tensions were extremely high between Britain
Right,
and
I
Spain.
remember this now. It was used as
Yeah,
like a political tool.
but in
too.
Britain, the story that would later be known as the War of Jenkins's Ear had been brewing for a while. You see, during the 1713 Treaty of Utrecht, known then as like the quote Treaty of Peace and Friendship, which we'll get into. It is not that. A lot of things had been negotiated between various European powers and like the lands that they all held. But one of the most important things for our story to tell about that is that it brought Spain and Britain to the negotiation table, where they were able to sign a treaty which allowed Britain to send a single 500-ton ship to the Americas to trade with the Spanish there. So the frequency and size at which ships would head to the New World was basically going to be overlooked the entire time. But, they had struck a deal, and that was the important part of the whole summit.
Well, also, what's it called? Mercantilism. Right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That can't like that idea that like there's only so much money to be made or trade to be had.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so wars were fought over interruption of a single ship.
Yeah. And so we're going to get a little bit into that because there's a couple more things that really set the stage for what's actually happening politically here. That again brings us to Jenkins's ear being a Franz Ferdinand kind of situation. But what we're going to do is we're going to get to that after the break.
Are you Jenks my ear? Jenkins
you
my ear,
son
man.
of a bitch.
What the fuck? You pulling my leg? You Jenkins my ear.
And
Oh,
we're
man,
Jenkins's
he's really Jenkins your ear.
Ear.
Cool.
This episode of Black Sheep and Bad Apples is brought to you by bats. And it's just a shipment of bats. Maybe for mosquitoes, maybe for a hobby, maybe to release into a random politician's house so when they come home they think that Dracula is there in their house. What you do with them is up to you. Bats.net.
Hello, we'd like all citizens of our great nation to consider getting a laser-guided orbital defense lasso cannon. We, your generous supervisors, are now willing to offer big discounts on cannons between the 19-inch variable detonation to the new 46-inch cluster launch. It has always been the American dream to own one of these bad boys, and with the incipient space mime invasion, our losses are your gains. God Emperor Justin Bieber has issued an executive order to offer tax write-offs and subsidies to keep these sky snakes flying through the atmosphere, effectively giving you, the American patriot consumer, a steep discount. So order now from your local district commissary. Laser-guided orbital defense lasso cannon. Let freedom ring.
Sean,
Nope.
are we back? So, before we continue, I want to ask Ron.
I really tried.
How are you feeling about the story so far?
I'm feeling. Actually, the story's pretty cool. Like, I like to hear about the historical shit.
Yeah.
I don't know too much about it.
And how do do you feel about my delivery?
James,
It's not delivery. It's DiGiorno.
Oh shit! It's true because I'm bringing it to you guys.
Our new
Nice and
sponsor.
crust.
That's awesome. So before the break, you guys will remember that we were talking about like the Treaty of Utrecht, which I think is how you pronounce it. And during the Treaty of Utrecht, the British were allowed to send a single 500-ton ship to Spanish-controlled territories in the Caribbean.
Utrecht.
And how like sometimes, probably most of the time, the rules of the treaty were just basically ignored. So also in the Treaty of Utrecht, the British received the rights over what amounted to a monopoly on Asiento de Negro, translated literally as seat of black. Britain was able to negotiate the exclusive rights to sell slaves, mostly African, to various parts of the Spanish colonies. Now, the rights to asiento as well as the naivo de permiso was technically given to the South Sea Company, but the British government had acquired them like 3 years after. The naivo de permiso effectively allowed the British to send two of these 500-ton ships to Portobello and Veracruz, which were Spanish-controlled territories. It was during these times that people had basically overlooked all the rules about these like treaties. In fact, the asiento wasn't really profitable. It was just really a legal precedent that allowed trade between Britain and the Americas. And the previous owner of the asiento had made most of their money smuggling goods that they got through customs. Being that smuggling was a widespread problem, the Spanish entered into the Anglo-Spanish War in 1927.
1927?
1727, sorry.
Yeah.
God damn my dyscalculia shit. Wherein they would allow French ships to flow unmolested through their holdings and territories, but the Spanish would impose fierce and strict restrictions against their rivals, the British. This was the same year that the Anglo-Spanish War, or in the same year that the Anglo-Spanish War ended, 1729. That was when the Treaty of Seville allowed the Spanish to board British ships.
This was early 1700s?
Yeah. This is still like before the 30s of the 1700s. And this treaty allowed basically the Spanish to board British ships, and it was presumably just to show like good intentions between the two nations. And this brings us back to Jenkins's Ear. 2.5 years after this treaty, the British ship Rebecca was boarded, and most likely having found contraband, Fandinho did something to Jenkins, and then cut off his ear. And upon their departure, Jenkins was told by Fandinho, "Go and tell your king that I will do the same if he dares to do the same." Which honestly is some pretty weak shit talk, but it sounds like he was like, cut off my ear and I'll cut off your king's ear, kind of.
Yeah, but
Weird flex, dude.
Yeah.
But you're thinking
me.
about it outside the context. You're Facebooking this shit. Back then, like somebody's king, that was their absolute ruler. You don't understand what it's like to live under an absolute ruler. None of us do.
We got close.
Somebody talks shit on your fucking gang boss. You're like,
You gotta do something.
That's not a small slight.
Yeah.
That's big doings. That's a fucking besmirch to besmirches.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and so the king during this time, this was when a lot of like weird British politics were changing, and so I don't know all the details, but during this time the king was not as powerful as he used to be.
Right.
Sir Robert Walpole, who held the seat of the first Earl of Oxford, which it means literally nothing to me because I don't get British politics.
Oxford is a place.
Orford. Did I say Oxford?
Yeah.
Man, I'm bad at reading.
But Orford's, if he's an earl or a duke,
Yeah, it's Orford.
those are locations on the island.
Yeah, and so Robert Walpole actually held the first seat as the de facto prime minister in Britain, and he was more or less in charge. And this was, again, because the powers were kind of changing from the king over to, like, parliament. And so, again, by effect, he kind of fell into becoming the first prime minister. And a lot of changes were happening in Britain, and these difficult changes were like the transition from the rule of the monarch to the rule of the parliament. And some historians suggest that the timing of the War of Jenkins' Ear was actually a hard push from the Country Party in Britain to get Walpole out of office. So when King George
Right. They forced the prime minister's hand.
Yeah.
In a sense, this was like fear mongering that. Like, he couldn't not get into the war that they knew they were going to lose.
Exactly. And there's this weird thing that like kind of clicked in my head as I was going through this story. And it was like, I think that like the language barrier between English and Spanish kind of moved across the Atlantic into like what now is Mexico and the United States. And that language barrier is really a divisive line between a lot of people. I don't know that as a fact, but it sounds like that sentiment that the British held against the Spanish, that's still carrying on to this day.
The easiest way to have a fight with somebody is to have something lost in translation.
Exactly.
A perceived slight or a miscommunication could be the hinge pin for all manner of...
Which,
what'd you just
we're
say
about
about
to get
me?
into perceived slights. Yeah. And so when King George first died, many thought that Walpole would be removed from his position by King George II. However, the king kind of decided to keep Walpole in office, like controversially. And although he didn't like Charles Townshend, The Secretary of State, Townsend, thank you. He decided to keep him on as well, and as kind of an editorial here, I think that this was kind of a balancing act by George II to like keep one person from having too much party or power. You got to keep his rival on as well.
I think we think king. It's like, oh, this absolute ruler, but by this point in Europe, almost every monarchy had long established like rule of law.
Yeah.
That also included what the king could and couldn't do.
Yeah, we were finding our democracy.
This was to appease the pitchfork mob. This was to appease the commoner who said, we want, you exist because of us.
No taxation without representation, as a libertarian.
He's not my king. I didn't vote for him.
Yeah. So, after Robert Jenkins's arrival to the House of Commons in 1739, so this is again like 8 years after his ear got cut off. So it's a wild story. So in 1730,
leathery fucking
one leathery
ear he brought, dude. It like clacked when he dropped it on.
Yeah. So after his arrival to the House of Commons and his subsequent delivery of his story, the British had heard fucking enough. Since they had been in repeated conflicts with the Spanish, even though they had clear treaties, the British were just fucking fed up. They considered Jenkins's ear to be the breaking point. The, quote, Spanish depredations upon the British subjects, end quote, was an insult to Britain's honor, and they likely saw it as an act of war.
Van, go away. Come on, seriously.
Dude, hella hating on those Spanish galleons.
Yeah.
Really.
And so
when you're looking for a reason.
Really?
Yeah, and so now we've established like some key players here, and we've got kind of a sort of like a very surface level of the British and Spanish politics at the time. But before we go on here, I do want to say that all the information provided has been, very European centric. And I'd like to note just for a second that the War of Jenkins' Ear was going on as diseases are spreading throughout these indigenous populations on these islands, as well as every other human on the planet. The Italian assholes' arrival set off all these clashes, wars, and battles that literally decimated the indigenous populations, as well as...
That was 300 years, 250 years
Yeah.
after... The War of Jenkins' Ear is 250 years after Columbus...
Yeah.
landed in the Americas.
And like with all these new arrivals, they brought in like slaves and traders, workers, soldiers, and all of these people were exposed to various diseases. And these indigenous people were also being taken into slavery, and they were removed from their lands if they were lucky. Otherwise, they were just killed on sight.
Forced into religious ideologies they didn't believe in.
Yeah, and so like the trauma of the clash of cultures and diseases and society, like this type of society was just a pox on the American and Caribbean natives. And so during the story, like we have to remember that they lived for centuries without this level of political and social upheaval. And these outside influences turned the quiet, like tropical Caribbean into a blood-soaked free-for-all, effectively bringing European problems to the New World with them. In fact, the Lucian Taino culture didn't last long after Columbus. By the mid-16th century, smallpox and slavery had taken the Tainos to the brink of destruction. And this happens over and over anywhere we look at these kind of stories.
Yeah, guns, germs, and steel.
Yeah, the American Midland, we look at the Andaman Islands, Tasmania, the Congo, even here in California. The expansion of European, quote, discoveries has led to countless genocides throughout the centuries. And all of this makes the sort of like naive and cutesy story of Columbus that we were taught in high school, it makes it feels like an insidious plot point by a Marvel movie. And it's
that's
just
much of what the Christian, this is much of what faith does to the world.
Yeah.
Christianity has been the downfall of more Neolithic civilizations than anything else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so it's just like I want us to know, because we're getting into the actual details of Jenkins's ear and the battles therein. And I just want it noted that all of this stuff is like happening while we're talking about this other stuff. And so this isn't like I just...
No, it's still happening.
Yeah, and it is still happening. And I just wanted to bring it to the forefront of everybody's attention because we are going back into the European-centric view of things. But all of this stuff is happening. And so...
Most of the world is captured in some way or another by the European-centric view of things.
Mm-hmm.
That's an entire season of a podcast and not a rabbit
is,
hole
yeah.
we should go down.
No.
But
It's important.
Let the flag be planted.
Yeah.
You know, as Christopher did, that piece of shit.
The
That-
Italian asshole.
That Italian asshole. God, now we need to figure out how to say asshole in Italian. We will forever refer to him as such.
Yeah.
But
As a whole. I think that's
whole,
racism.
yo.
I think that's racism, but we'll bring that up in another podcast.
yeah,
too.
yeah, yeah.
It was accent. Sorry, I just.
No. The European culture and a Roman Catholic culture, but Christian culture, has been the downfall of many a civilization that existed for many thousands of years before the ideological viewpoint of Christianity showed up.
Mm-hmm.
And anytime you talk about Europeans showing up somewhere that
It's
they
bad.
haven't been, you're thusly saying that
Yeah.
as well.
you wanna
And
fight
so
about it?
This is the disclaimer.
Oh
going
shit!
forward.
No, Sean wants you to fight you about
Let's
it.
just fight about it then.
Do you think you're more
Right?
Christian than Sam?
I mean,
Sam, do you think you're more Christian than Sean?
no, fuck no. I am like, if we were gonna like, I am the most corn-fed kid here
All right then.
for sure.
Then let's
Which is
fight.
weird because you grew up in
Oh, wait.
New York, but
But
ain't no judgment here.
I grew up in New York next to a 250-acre cornfield. Literally,
Hell yeah, dude.
It's like that was part of the property that my father bought.
So you think you got what
Before
it
he
takes
bought
to
it.
out Christian Sean?
No, I'm saying I've got what it takes to out corn-fed this motherfucker.
Stronzo!
Saranzo,
born-
is that how you say it?
I was born in a
Yeah, the
cornfield.
assholes in Italian.
No, let's be
Stronzo.
real. And
It's Stranzo. That's how you say it? Yeah, hell yeah. That's how you say it in Italian. How you say
Asshole?
asshole. The Stranzo.
that's Stranzo.
So I do
That's Stranzo.
I do want to bring us into the actual
Italian fucking
I do want to bring us into
So
the
you're just-
actual
Never mind.
meat of our story tonight, our subject tonight, which is the War of Jenkins Ear.
Yes.
So
This poor leather-eared
this
piece of
leather-eared
shit.
piece of shit.
Privateer
So,
English bastard.
After
Yes,
deciding
continue.
that the Spanish had insulted the British crown, the British had sent ships to the Caribbean to start more or less fucking Spanish shit up. It was March of 1738 that Jenkins's ear was allegedly shown to the House of Commons. The reason it's alleged is because we have no detailed records that show this hearing
there was
ever
no
happened.
photo.
Ah, that was good. I like
Yes.
that.
Nailed
Show
it.
this hearing.
Nailed it.
Ron needs to go to the bathroom for a second after that.
Yeah, and so there's no evidence that this hearing ever happened, but I think that there's always at least a kernel of truth to it, and so I wanted to bring it into the story. Now, it wasn't until the 22nd of October, 1739, 282 years to the day of my having written this, that the first battle of Jenkins's
day?
ear
To the day.
began. To the day.
Can we high five?
We can high
Next to
five.
a microphone.
Yeah. Oh. Yep. Oh, in your mic? Okay. We did
guys
it.
hear
That
that?
was awkward.
That was
Put it in
definitely in
post.
the middle of two microphones.
That was-
That was not even close to one or the other.
And so we're going to be talking about a couple of different battles that happened tonight. And the first one is, I don't know how to pronounce it exactly, but La Guaira is how I'm going to pronounce it tonight. And so we're talking about La Guaira, Venezuela. And this is
Guerra?
La Guaira, something like that. Yeah. So forgive me for butchering it, any Spanish speakers. I'm trying. And this all happened on October 22nd, 1739. So, with an all-out war declared, Britain's Admiral Eddie Vernon, guys.
Vernon Supreme.
Vernon Supreme.
Eddie Vernon Supreme.
He had been ordered in August of 1939 to attempt the capture of two Spanish treasure trips between La Guaira, Venezuela, and Portobello, Panama. This would later turn into the first battle of the War of Jenkins Ear. By capturing these vessels, they hoped that they would have enough money to, oh shit, I lost my spot. Where'd it go?
Oh, one of these two battles is really interesting because of the landscape.
Yeah,
Too.
and so by capturing these vessels, they hoped that they would have enough money to help them offset the cost of the War of Jenkins Ear. Admiral Vernon sent 3 ships commanded by Captain Thomas Waterhouse to patrol and intercept Spanish treasure trips between La Guaira, Venezuela, and Portobello in Panama. The Spanish treasure ships he was ordered to go after just very easily evaded his capture. But Captain Waterhouse, perhaps looking for redemption, decided to attack several vessels he saw in La Guaira.
Waterhouse.
Yeah, right? Waterhouse is his name.
My name is Captain Boat.
Yeah.
In a very long-winded way.
Guess what he did as a career?
No, wait. In a boat. No. He was
So dumb.
he really wanted to be a watchmaker, though.
Really? No. Oh, I was gonna say, what are you talking about? I didn't read that in any of my research. And so they were looking at La Guaira and thinking that the place not to be well defended. Captain Waterhouse kind of started making preparations. Now, the strategy here was to attack some ships to see the defenses of the Fort of La Guaira and, if possible, take the fort. So if they attacked some of these ships that were in the harbor, they would be able to see how many ships were actually in there and that would come out of the fortress and stuff, and how many soldiers would shoot cannons. They could assess the defenses that were going on here. However, the governor ahead of time, the governor, in air quotes, which we'll talk about later, of Venezuela, Brigadier Don Gabriel de Zuloaga had saw Waterhouse's ships and to himself thought about such a skirmish. With the British right outside of his port, he decided, he made this decision to just prepare the fort. He was like, fuck it, they'll come to us. And so this included, he took cannons out of his ships and created a port battery to hit ships in the water from the shore.
Yeah, land-based artillery is going to be way more
Thumbs
fucking
up.
accurate.
Yeah.
And way more. It's going to have more armor class.
And you can access it more.
No, it's made out of stone versus wood.
Yeah.
The boats are wood.
And so they also prepared several.
What Ron said.
Yeah, they also prepared several ships that were in the port itself. It being slick as fuck, my friends, Captain Waterhouse decided to enter the port flying the Spanish flag. This way he would essentially Trojan horse his way to victory. And it was a great, if not played out plan. However, the ruse was anticipated.
Fucking idiot!
And rather than immediately firing on the small fleet, the port of La Guaira stayed quiet. They allowed the British ships to enter into the eerily calm port. Once the British squadron got into range, every gun on the port fired simultaneously. So
like lined the fuck up.
Lined up, prepared.
Oh, dude, guns that didn't have rifling. You know, can you imagine you're on a bobber. You remember when you went fishing with somebody and you used the little thumbcaster reel?
Yeah.
Had the little bobber. And the bobber would dance around. That's what the boats were doing, trying to fire guns that had no rifling. Meanwhile, there were stone forts just going plink.
So there was 3 more hours of combat before Waterhouse, perhaps a day late and a buck short, ordered a retreat. Their squadron was lucky enough to escape the fort and limp back to Jamaica for repairs. This was the extremely unsuccessful first battle in the War of Jenkins Ear. So the results of this battle could have been handled a little bit differently had the Crown not been so cautious. We're gonna quote warhistoryonline.com again for this. Quote, the conflict began poorly for the British and they suffered from several underlying challenges going into the conflict. For example, they expected the French to join in on the Spanish side. This would give the Franco-Spanish alliance in Europe an overall advantage on the high seas and made an invasion of the British Isles a real threat. Therefore, despite the fact that the French never actually entered into the war, the War of Jenkins Ear, the British government decided to hold many of its forces in southern England and refused to launch major assaults into the Americas. So literally, the reason our boy Waterhouse fails in this story is because the British think that the French are going to attack them over on the mainland of Europe, and it never ended up happening because France was just like, no, we're neutral, dude. We're peace. And so it's just really funny that this whole thing could have gone so much better had the British Crown and the Parliament at this time had really had the foresight to understand that they were going to take over America at one point. easily with this war, they could have started their expansion from just like what we now know is like the United States of America being under British control. They could have easily taken Mexico and parts of Southern America. And this was really the pivotal part of like kind of what I'm talking about with these indigenous people is that like because Britain was so cautious, they really failed to seize an opportunity here in the Caribbean. And it really was a detriment here at Jenkins's war.
In part, that I think came from the fact that the Spanish had seized and taken through force most of the like readily available gold.
Yeah.
Gold. And that all the Americas really represented was a place you could build ships and a place to farm.
And a gold factory. Because we're still dealing with that gold rush time right now.
For sure. And ever westwardly as European culture expanded, literally we live in Hayfork. When white people first showed up in Hayfork, they found gold rocks in chunks in the river.
Started
So
murdering
it's different. You can't make a gold knife. Doesn't really work.
No.
The gold served little use for the very strong, very intelligent Neolithic people who lived here.
Yeah. It was
like,
literally,
oh, nice.
It was it was fancy and shiny, and that's what
You
made
ever
it.
notice how nerds don't give a shit about like fancy stuff?
No.
They're like, cool, good job. I do high calculus or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
Man, can
High
you make a
calculus.
D20 out of that though?
Yeah, hit that D20.
I would buy a D20 gold inlaid.
But why
D20.
do nerds like things that use a D20? Because they take intelligence to play well.
Oh shit! Shots fired.
Right. Bing, 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 bing.
So
bing.
we're gonna next talk about Portobello. La Gaira was a dismal defeat, but Admiral Vernon was just getting started.
I can't believe that dude thought that would work.
A month after his failed attack, Vernon sent a squadron of ships to take over the fort in Portobello, Panama, on November 22nd, 1739. I nailed that date. Go me. Thank you, high five. With just 6 ships, Vernon attacked and secured the port in less than 24 hours. And so I wish that I could provide you guys more details, but it was literally just he came in and took it. There's not a whole lot more details. And this spot was particularly important because it was the silver hub of the Spanish, and it was taken and held for weeks. Now, the 3-ish week long, why did I write it like that? 3-ish week long occupation ended when the British had finished their mission. Their mission was to destroy the port's fortifications, warehouses, and the port itself. And it was just essentially dealing a heavy-handed blow to Spanish infrastructure in the region. They were just fucking their shit up.
Fuck your mercantilism.
So the battle ended with
That's a real kick in the dick.
It really is. Like, you can't use this port anymore without, like, serious heavy-handed work. And so the battle ended with British casualties at 3, 7 wounded, and the Spanish had nearly 300 people captured. But as far as I can tell... But
nobody died.
As far as I can tell, nobody died.
Didn't really lose much in
No.
this whole war.
Yeah, and so the British...
As far as boats or soldiers go.
Well, and in this one, the British had destroyed 1 warship during the onslaught, and they had captured 3 other, like, kind of smaller vessels. But it's still not a big win.
Not a schooner.
Yeah.
Like a 30... I remember this. It was like 15 to 20 gun little... Like, basically modified merchant vessel.
Yeah, it was like a privateer vessel, really. And so this was the point where the war was beginning to ramp up, and public opinion was changing with this victory at Portobello. See, Spain had a protocol of only trading with their colonies twice a year or so, and this was to kind of to avoid pirates and privateers and all these kinds of people from like taking over their ships and stealing their loot.
Well, they'd send an armada.
Yeah, and so the Spanish government would round up the riches that they had acquired throughout the year or so on the mainland, and they would take all the gold and silver and the like and send the loot back to like different posts, different like ports to be staged for transport to the Spanish kingdom. And as Sam was saying, the strategy was to collect the flotilla or the fleet in Cadiz, Spain, and then sail it to Portobello or Veracruz and a couple of other places where they would collect all this stuff. And this was all just sent back to the crown. So the victory at Portobello, after that, the Spanish had to modify their flotilla convoys by having them become more numerous and frequent, but smaller, and using smaller ships to carry the treasure back to Spain.
Yeah, for sure. No, what I was thinking, why I'm pointing my finger is because this just reminds me. The English forever made a real habit out of trying to pirate other countries' flotillas, like all these trading companies that were like private corporations that worked inside the government of a country. They were like part and parcel, like you were mentioning, like the West Indies Trading Company was acquired by the English government.
Yeah.
Right? So like part of that was that it was better for everybody involved if they could figure out how to get like,
and it changed the legalities of it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because it's all existing within the law of rule.
Yeah. And the law of commerce too. Yeah.
And mercantilism, which says that there's only so much commerce that can happen in any given region.
Yeah.
Get it.
But
the English were long famous for trying to hijack countries. They fought the Dutch 100 years earlier.
Yeah.
This is where the ships of the line, I saw this everywhere. The ships of the line. In
Not
all
too much
these,
detail because we're getting to it.
But that term comes from 100 years before in a war that the English fought with the Dutch, this great naval war they fought, where this term, the line, it's actually a naval tactic.
Yeah.
Comes from. And so for 100 years, the English had been trying to hijack the Dutch, the Spanish, and the French trading fleets.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No. But you're right, because like
standing...
Spain had this naval superiority, and that's what made a lot of these other countries have to work that extra, extra effort into it.
Spain had the quality of ships.
Yeah.
France had the largest ground army. Like France could fucking march into anywhere.
And the British, I believe, still have the biggest navy in the world. Or at least maybe that changed in like the 50s or something like that. But I know for a long time they did.
No, check this out. The thing the British had was that somebody had this great idea. Some admiral, and I forget his name, developed this naval fighting tactic called the line.
Oh,
and what it had to do with was like
it'll come back into what we're doing.
But it was like 100 years earlier, this one admiral developed this fighting technique on the ocean that needed a high degree of communication between each ship.
Yeah.
And the British fleet, which didn't have the biggest ships or the biggest populations or the most gold, had the most tenacity in some way.
They really did.
They practiced their technique. And what it was this, they would fight in a line instead of in groups. And it devastated other navies.
Yeah, so...
it did so for...
You'll help me decipher...
I'm not jumping you.
No, you're not. But you'll actually help me describe something else that's going on later, and it's a naval tactic that I don't understand. So I really appreciate you bringing that into the podcast, because it is something that, again, we're going to touch on here in a little bit.
And it's why the Dutch fought the British first on this.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's why the Dutch also became, by the time Jenkins Ear happened, the Dutch were... very powerful.
Yeah. Well, they had the East India Trading Company for a while.
But the reason they were able to maintain that shit, because England harassed them for fucking 50 years.
Yeah.
Or more before they fought a huge war about it. A huge war.
We should
One of the biggest naval battle to date at that point was fought in that war. And it was over the Dutch East Indies, trading companies.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, no, it's cool. We will actually touch on the Dutch East India trading companies and a bunch of the trading companies in the past, because I think that they're really interesting stories that kind of bring us into our modern perspective.
But it's a history of piracy.
Yeah. But for now, I do want to note one thing about like the conquering of Portobello here in the story, because this the conquering of Portobello the fascinating thing about it that I discovered was that its economy, it didn't recover until 200 years later. Columbus was literally looking for a trade route between India and Asia, and when the Panama Canal was built, which literally fulfilled Columbus's mission,
Largest man-made structure
the
ever.
town of Portobello's economy began booming again. So it was, again, more than 200 years later. So the hard-hitting aspect of the victory at Portobello was that the British had gained control over a main silver port, but it was also that they had begun capturing the hearts and minds of the people at home. This war had become lucrative and winnable. And the Patriot Whigs, which are like a political party in the UK, as well as the Tories, who are rivals, had both begun pressuring had both begun to pressure Prime Minister Walpole into sending a larger naval expedition into the Caribbean, ensuring that they could gain victory in the Gulf of Mexico and Caribbean. Now, when we get back from our break, we are going to talk a little bit about, actually a lot about the first attack on Cartagena de Indias, which we'll explain in a little bit, but how this certain place as a location was just a difficult thing in this war. And so when we get back, we're going to have that conversation. But until then, Ron, how do you feel? How do you feel about all this war talk?
Man, I want to go to a Waffle House.
I could use the waffle myself.
Yeah, I could. Yeah.
I feel like this is gonna falafel.
Oh, we're not gonna flop though. Oh,
Ouch.
Yeah, I really tripped and fell on my face.
That's a break.
Yeah, that's
Go
our
to
break.
commercial, man. Do
Commercial.
Play
Cut.
the ad for
Sean,
Waffle.
Sean, cut the commercials. Shut it down, Sean. Break. No, dude, I can do this. Just give me the script again. I can do this. I swear. I swear.
I believe
give it to me.
had a lot of sugar
One more?
straws.
One more? Please? One more?
more.
Okay.
No
I got
more
this.
sugar straws.
No more. I got this though.
No more sugar straws.
No more sugar straws.
Fourth corner. New sponsor product. Trial run. Take 11.
At the cutting edge of drinking technology is the sugar straw! Minimize your yearly waste and reduce your carbon footprint by drinking from the sugar straw. It makes every drink taste great. I've been drinking wine through it at home, and I like that it gets really sticky and stays stuck to the side of the glass. It also makes wine more palatable by adding like a nice little sugar flavor to it. So go out and get your sugar straws wherever you purchase your straw alternatives. We are back from a very interesting break. So before our break, we talked a little bit about the battle and victory of Portobello after a dismal defeat at La Gaita. And we're going to kind of jump back into the War of Jenkins Ear with their first attack on Cartagena de Indias. So Cartagena de Indias, as it was known, because everybody back then thought that these brown people were just a different type of Indian and were very racist.
They didn't realize that the Pacific Ocean was there.
It was, yeah, they had no idea.
It's really what
yeah.
they just,
yeah,
it wasn't there.
Yeah, and so Cartagena de Indias is a site in present-day Colombia and was viewed as the prime objective at the time by Admiral Vernon, again, our British admiral. And it was one of many Spanish ports and one of the biggest that exported a lot of Spanish goods for which the British and Admiral Vernon himself, they were looking. So as both of these two characters around this time began gathering as much intelligence of the port's defenses as possible, they were kind of bad at it. Unfortunately, the men who Vernon sent weren't able to do their intelligence gathering due to being denied at the port. So Vernon took some different tactics. So they literally tried to sail in as soldiers, and we're like, we'd like
Spanish.
We'd like to take a look around.
No.
Yeah, and so Vernon took some different tactics, and essentially they launched from Port Royal in Jamaica in March of 1740. During these times, from between the 17th century and the mid-1800s, naval wars were mostly won almost invariably by the biggest and baddest ships. The main aspect of battle was flipping the ships to their broadsides, where a majority of the cannon sat, and just launching cannonballs into the opponent until their ship was rendered, immobile, the crew called to feed, or the ship was sunk.
For fucking hours.
So if a ship had more
Hours.
guns on the broadside,
Hours.
they had the ability to do multiple times the amount of damage on a smaller ship that with lesser guns, and how much damage they would do. And these gigantic ships with hundreds of guns sometimes, and not very often, were called ships of the line. Now, in order to get like all these ships at Cartagena, Vernon left Port Royal with 6 ships of the line. And do you want to kind of describe ships of the line a little bit? Because they're pretty badass ships.
So a ship of the line, as far as the English Navy is concerned,
Yeah.
If I remember correctly, Vernon had mostly, if not all, 4th class ship of the line.
Yeah, something like that.
So they had somewhere between 45 and 60 guns on the entire ship.
Mm-hmm.
In 3 levels. Right? So 6 rows of guns. So on the biggest ship, there's 10 guns on each row.
Yeah.
So they definitely fucked their ship up.
Well,
They definitely fucked some ships up, yeah.
These battles, man, you're throwing like a chunk of metal through a wooden boat.
Yeah.
Now imagine shooting a piece of cardboard with a BB. Does it fucking destroy the whole piece of cardboard? No, it makes a little hole. So,
but
you're
if you
really
got a
trying
lot of
to
BBs,
knock enough holes,
Yeah.
enough of these little holes through your enemy's ship that it either sinks, starts to list, so it can't aim its cannons right, or you hit the powder room and the thing actually explodes.
Boom.
And if that happens, that ship's
Yeah.
literally pieces. But mostly they just sunk slowly.
Yeah, and so Vernon left Port Royal, Jamaica, with 6 of these ships, like these big badass boys. And he left with 2 fire ships, 3 bomb vessels, and 2 more transport ships, and made his way towards Colombia. 6 days later, March 13th, 1740, they had arrived in the area of Cartagena. He immediately sent men to land to explore and map the topography and to map the Spanish squadron location in Playa Grande, which is in modern-day Santa Marta in the province of Magdalena, Colombia. And what it might be the most strangest plays that I have ever heard of, it appears Vernon got a little anxious after 5 days of not seeing any. So he moved a bunch of ships into this fucking port, and nothing happened. No ships came out, no cannons were shot. And so for like 5 days, he was sitting here with no response to his fleet from the Spanish. And what he decided in that time was it was the right thing to do, apparently. And he sent 3 bomb ships to just open fire on the city. Now, being a competent counterpart, the Spanish Admiral Blas de Lezo, who was the guy who was governing this region at the time, was a fucking genius. He refused to respond immediately to the bombing of this port. Instead, he ordered his soldiers to remove their guns from their ships and set them up as like a temporary and makeshift shore battery to offer suppressive fire. And so, after an attempt to land 400 men on shore was impossible, and 21 days of combat, Vernon withdrew. And he left 2 ships in the area to basically try to take any Spanish ships that may come in or out of the port. And so he has this really staunch, a really staunch defeat that is like Blas de Lezo, the admiral of the Spanish company at the time, it just doesn't even think twice about it. He's like, oh, they came to attack me, big fucking deal. And it's like kind of an embarrassing moment for him. So he just has to leave after what 21 days, I think I said. Yeah. So it's real bad. Which is weird because he had just taken Portobello without a problem. So it's again
without a fight.
He's got 2-1 now. 2-1 now. So next we're going to talk about San Lorenzo El Real Chagres. And as an important note, attacking and taking ports was a huge blow to the colonies set up in the New World, as most of them relied more or less on goods arriving at regular times. The main populations of these colonies lived on the sea, and although fewer, there was people that lived inland, and it was fewer. and these were mostly towards like they lived near like the mines and trading posts and stuff like that. But by cutting off the trade routes that were destroying these ports, the flow of goods and resources to these settlements were significantly diminished, leaving those left at the colony a harder time of procuring goods. Which is why, after getting their asses handed to them for 21 days, Admiral Vernon set his sights on another Spanish stronghold in the area, since they had already destroyed Portobello. It seemed only right to head further southwest along the Panamanian coast to a port called San Lorenzo el Real Chagres, known now as Fort San Lorenzo in Colón, Panama. And the defenses that sat at this port at San Lorenzo were as follows: quote, a few patrol boats, 4 guns, 30 soldiers led by a Don Juan Carlos Gutierrez Ceballos. And this was the main station in the Caribbean for the Spanish Costa Guarde, which is their coast guard. Which meant that if Vernon could take this point, it would essentially have effectively destroyed all the Spanish defensive positions in that area. It would also allow Vernon and the British Empire to more or less kind of freely roam the Caribbean, kind of virtually undisturbed by the Spanish patrols. Or at least that's what they thought at the time.
But Don Juan.
Yeah, and so again, like if they could capture this one spot, to them, the Spanish would have no more strongholds in the area, which is wrong because they had so many strongholds and much more ships coming. But it's kind of what they thought about it at the time. And so on March 22nd, 1740, the British squadron, which held 2 60-gun ships of the line and 2 50-gun ships of the line, as well as a frigate, 3 bomb vessels, 2 fire ships, and 2 transport vessels, moved into the Bay of San Lorenzo and began bombarding that town with fire. So, 2 days into the bombardment, the Spanish Captain Ceballos surrendered the fort. The British then went just immediately to work, as they had in Portobello, and they had just destroyed the fort and its infrastructures. They seized all their guns and 2 Spanish patrol boats and left back to Portobello to regroup their forces. And so as this was happening, Spain...
It was a raid.
Yeah, it was a raid, and they weren't well defended. They had 30 dudes. Like, y'all are going to take that, hands down. And as all this was happening, Spain, displeased with the goings-on and loss of territory in the Caribbean, decided to change the governor of Cartagena. Lieutenant General Sebastian L. Esclava y Lazaga replaced Don Pedro Hidalgo in order to grant kind of a vision of like they wanted to see more of like a civil government than it was a military government, but it was still that. And he was instated as the Viceroy of Granada. And just as like a note about this, the governor is generally seen as like a historic misnomer. Viceroy was more of an apt term, as they basically had all the powers of the king in this new place. They weren't heritage titles, so the sons of a viceroy wouldn't like automatically get a throne. It would still belong to the kingdom.
Right.
Yeah. And so now we're going to get into Vernon's second attempt at Cartagena, which is... Yeah. So a few months later, Admiral Vernon, after having reorganized his fleet, decided to take another shot at Cartagena de Indias. As Vernon moved his HMS Princess Caroline, which was a 80-gun, 3-decker ship of the line, and 13 warships into the
third class.
It was a third class, yeah. As he moved these warships into the bay, Admiral Lezo, who still commanded Cartagena, deployed 6 of his ships of the line. And Lezo did this in such a way that it kind of forced the British into ranges where they were stuck with only taking like what amounts to pop shots. I don't have a whole lot of details, Sam. You could probably fill this in as to how the Spanish did this, but it seemed pretty effective because the British had really no other choice other than to fire short range or long range shots, which minimized their effectiveness. These were some kind of like evasive maneuvers that the Spanish had. And
from their boats?
Yeah. And these were still ships of the line, so it's, different ships of the line going at each other.
Ship of the line comes, I think, particularly from the British Navy. Spanish didn't have ships of the line; they had like galleons.
Yeah, and that's kind of the point of what's like it's galleons versus ships of the line.
When I looked into it, I didn't really find much information about the Spanish Navy. But I really feel that the Spanish Navy just had much bigger ship. When they had a bigger ship, like a big gunship, it was humongous.
Yeah.
And
It seems they were more maneuverable, which is what I'm kind of getting from the story. But again, I don't have any details about it.
the British fought on a tactic of the line, which was literally lining your ships up so that they could fire broadside at the enemy armada. And it worked really well for them for many years because the other armadas didn't do that.
Yeah.
They would cluster up. And if you're in little battle groups, if you can think about like 4 ships together in a group, the lead ships are going to be blocking the cannons of the ships behind them.
Yeah.
The British ships didn't do that, and it was really successful because they could aim their
A
guns.
shitload of guns all at once.
All the guns
Yeah.
could be aimed all at once on one half of the ships.
Yeah.
Spanish ships are not British ships. I really do believe that the Spanish ships were probably possessed something like 80 to 90 guns each.
Yeah. They were big ships.
They were big ships.
And again, like, so I guess we'll never know. Like I don't know as a nautical historian what kind of maneuvers the Spanish were taking, but essentially Lezo in this time made his ships like move around the British ships in such a way that it was just impossible to hit them with anything other than like a long range, like I'm gonna try to hit you from a distance, shot in the dark, versus like trying to blast them like with a shotgun as they fly by.
I mean, the Caribbean's full of islands too.
Yeah, and so like I don't know what happened, but essentially after a time of engaging with the Spanish ships like this, Admiral Vernon just withdrew his ships. And basically he was kind of doing it on like kind of the reasons of basically like, well, like I wasn't even trying to take Cartagena. I was just trying something new.
Well, weird, like
Yeah.
cold open thing. Like, so this would be the 3rd time that Vernon had withdrawn.
Yeah, this is the 3rd time that he's withdrawn, and the second time doing this at Cartagena. So like he's literally tried to
Twice
take
failed
this
at
place.
the same
Yeah.
city.
Yeah. So was this the first time that they took out ships on the Spanish?
No, they had been taking out ships this whole time.
Oh,
like
shit.
During the attack on La Gaita, the taking in Portobello, and in Portobello I think they sank like 2 ships, so it wasn't much, but they've been fucking ships up this whole time.
2 ships is a lot.
It is, yeah, and so he failed horribly at the second attempt of taking Cartagena, and it like old Admiral Eddie Vernon. It seems that he really tried again at a 3rd attempt.
Or Cartagena?
Cartagena, yeah.
Cartagena.
And so he was really hoping that his previous attempts at Cartagena hadn't like portended defeat. After all, Cartagena was a place from where like the largest amounts of gold was exported and traded. So deciding to be a little bit more bold, Vernon's final attempt at the port of Cartagena had to be fucking big. It was thought to be a simple battle, for it was estimated that the assault had a great chance of success. So it looks like things are going to go well. And so what Vernon does is he secures ships from the British Isles, and he kind of has to wait for them to arrive. And the interesting thing about this part is that the ships and support crew that were to help with the taking of Cartagena, they would have to suffer the logistic nightmare that is the transatlantic early colonial travel. En route to the Caribbean, the British suffered more. They suffered heavy losses even before the battle had begun due to tropical diseases and outbreaks of like yellow fever. These diseases took more lives than were lost in the total battle of Cartagena.
That's why if you look at the stats, the British losses are insane.
They're insane.
And then the Spanish, it's like in the hundreds. Soldiers lost, sailors lost.
Yeah, and so
In the total hundreds, and it's thousands for the British.
yeah,
It's weird.
and so excuse me. So as the British prepared, they gathered their ships in Jamaica, this was one of the largest fleets ever assembled in a single place. they had gathered somewhere between 186 and 554 ships, depending upon depending upon the report. They gathered all these in one place. So that includes 2,620 guns, 27,000 men, which is huge. But then there was also the addition of 12,600 sailors, 1,000 Jamaican slaves and macheteros, 4,000 recruits from India, which was, a British colony still. And the cool thing about the 4,000 recruits from Virginia was that they were led by a Lawrence Washington, who was the elder half-brother of George Washington. Pretty cool little trivia there. But it seemed the Spanish were also at this time gathering their forces. Admiral Blas de Lezo had been assigned to fortify a city, and as a Marine veteran, having fought in Europe in the War of the Spanish Succession, as well as having fought against European pirates in the Pacific Ocean and the Caribbean and Mediterranean Sea, he was just super well prepared with anything that might lay ahead. And he had there was 2 groups of Spanish ships, which was 6 ships of the line in total, 3,000 soldiers, 600 militia members, and a group of 600 native archers. And he had them all gather at Cartagena under his name in preparation for the attack. So, in what would later become the largest military action of the War of Jenkins Ear, in March of 1741, Vernon launched an amphibious attack. If he could take Cartagena, it would set Vernon up to take the island of Cuba with relative ease, and he would start with Havana. However, getting the troops into position had proved difficult to organize. Vernon was struggling with General Thomas Wentworth, who commanded his land forces. And this deep rivalry between Admiral Vernon and General Wentworth was a caustic situation, one that forced both men to be unwilling to cooperate with the other. And after a disagreement, Vernon and Wentworth launched the amphibious attack from the sea. But the suppressive fire was enough for the Spanish to resist, and the attempt to put 400 men on the ground failed. And see, that the main goal of the port of Cartagena was to the north and south of the island Terabamba. And to the north and south of these were 2 channels that led you directly to the Bay of Cartagena. So you couldn't access this region without going through these channels. So it was kind of a difficult thing. And if one was to get access to the bay, they would have to take these channels. And it was up to Vernon to kind of figure out which one was better. So the Boca Grande channel was the channel that was wider, but it had more sandbars, and so it kind of made the passages of warships risky. So the second, Boca Chica, which I love the names, it's like Big Mouth or Girl Mouth. Boca Chica was a narrower channel, but it was kind of less risky for Admiral Vernon, who opted for that channel. However, the difficult part was getting to that channel, which was just fucking heavily defended by the Fort of San Jose on one of these channels and the Fort of San Luis on the other. The British would have to take one of these forts in order to enter into the bay. So after clearing the port, these channels of scuttled ships, they were ready to kind of begin this part of the war. So on March 13th, 1741, Cartagena's population woke up to see the absolutely massive fleet of Admiral Vernon sitting in their port. Lezo, on the other hand, had a very simple plan. He was going to wage a war of attrition. His goal was to create such strong defenses within the city and along the ports that a series of small battles would be all that he needed in order to weaken the British, either outright winning or forcing them to retreat. So again, he's like, if I just chill and you guys can't penetrate shit, you guys are going down. There's no stopping me. And so it's kind of a brilliant move.
Where else is there
before
to run,
we had
aside from
before we had airplanes that dropped bombs? The only way to get in somewhere
Waste your ammo, bro.
Yep.
was by blood.
You only got so many cannonballs, and if they don't do shit, you're leaving.
And again, he's got
Well, that's
30,000 men.
You got to think how much powder was that fleet that fought for 21 days? How laden, how low on crew were they? They were trading crew for cannonballs.
Mm-hmm.
To be able to fight for 21 days, to trade shots for 21 days.
Yeah, and so Cartagena had been fortified in several different ways, and first was the port. The city's walls were high along the bay, and the rough water is outside of the actual bay of Cartagena itself. made a land assault team virtually impossible. And Lezo knew that the best option that the invaders would have would be to enter Cartagena's calm watered bay before attempting their assault. Now, Vernon was not going to back down. He started the war looking at smaller defense points in the Spanish entrance to the bay. At the fort of San Luis, Vernon sent men ashore to assemble a gun battery, and at this point, he started wearing the fort's defenses down. So again, if he can take one of these two forts, he's got access to the city. And simultaneously, the ships at sea would open fire with cannon fire at a rate of 62 shots an hour, guys.
A shot a minute.
It is
1 shot per minute.
1 shot per minute.
That seems
it
pretty
is
dealable. It seems like
incredible.
something you could
Well,
deal with.
but it was like all the guns on half the ship went off on a regular interval, sort of.
Yeah, as much as they could.
So every 12 minutes, all the guns would fire.
Yeah.
Once.
Man, if
Yeah.
you can't dodge a cannonball,
And so
Silence.
yeah, if you can't dodge a
What's that?
cannonball,
if you can't dodge a wrench, you can't dodge a cannonball.
those might be
What's
different.
that fucking dodgeball quote bullshit?
Yeah.
Or
Well,
whatever
actually,
the fuck-
it
Dodge a wrench.
you can dodge a cannonball.
Yeah, it reminds me of actually in that scene in Pirates of the Caribbean where they run out of cannonballs, but they're still trying to blast people with other things. And so some of their loot is a bunch of like these silver forks and knives and spoons and stuff. And so they just pack the powder in there and like shove all these like essentially what amounts to buckshot pieces of metal in the
Rocks.
cannon.
They
Yeah.
would use rocks.
Yeah, and it fucks up. Yeah, it's good movie. I'm gonna have to go home and watch those.
Well,
I
62
actually
shots
just
an hour,
watched
right?
the
Nice.
first 2 or 3.
In order to prepare for the episode tonight.
That's how I got all my information. No, the other night.
So, with these guys on shore and they were battering the wall's defenses and the people, in the ships that were shooting at the wall's defenses, this actually kind of worked. Like by creating a 2-pronged attack at sea and at shore, several weeks went by, which is so long. Several weeks went by before the British finally broke through the defenses of Lezo. Now,
1 shot a minute for several weeks.
yeah, and
No,
so
I mean they didn't fight it in the dark though. Really, they didn't.
well, on April 5th, the British executed a land and sea attack on the fort by night. And as they entered the forts, they noticed that Lezo had already withdrawn his forces under the cover of darkness. So this guy, again, I cannot emphasize how much of Lezo is such a brilliant tactician. Like he really knows what he's doing in regards to war, and he can kind of predict what's going on with the British because they just have a lot of guns. They're not that smart in warfare. Like they honestly, it's weird. Yeah.
Man, how much intellect does it take to realize that people will approach in darkness?
Yeah,
Like fucking obviously that's when you withdraw.
Yeah, and so at this point, the British had successfully captured the fort at San Luis, and it now looked promising that they were going to take Cartagena. And and this was partially because they had control of one of the 2 of the city's, well, 3 of the city's most outer defenses, and so they felt that they could siege this place, And it looked so promising that Vernon sent word to the Jamaica colony to say that their victory at Cartagena was imminent. Now, the funny thing about this, which we'll get
High
to,
fiving before you got there.
yeah. The funny thing about this is that word had gotten to Britain between the start and the finish of this war, and they started printing coins that had Admiral Lezo, the Spanish captain, kneeling down at the foot of Admiral Vernon.
Oh,
and
those
so
coins got to be worth some money today.
this gets pretty funny here. So Vernon was becoming quite confident,
It's like, oh God, get me some of them coins.
perhaps even cocky, even.
Yeah.
Having already in his mind all but taken the city, he began to grow kind of impatient, and this was most likely because he had sent that letter
Impatient
about
currency is worth
imminent
a
victory
lot today.
to Britain, but he hadn't secured his W. Lezo, on the other hand, was such a strategist, and he had realized that if the Castillo de San Felipe, a fort near Cartagena, was taken.
San Felipe.
Yeah. It would allow the British to bombard the city into submission, and as such, the fate of Cartagena was really resting upon this one fort. Lezo had counted in his war of attrition that the rainy season would begin around this time and help him by spreading disease among the British fleet. It was April, the rainy season, and if he could resist the siege, the rains would help him protect the city.
As long as I can keep my boys dry, they won't get sick and die.
Yep.
And the British will have to go bye-bye.
Yep.
Oh, dude, Cardi B wrote a song about this.
I was actually
Wet-ass
quoting Cardi.
Puritans.
Wet ass Puritans. Definitely that. Jesus Christ. You know what? Here's to Ron. Thanks for being back on the show, buddy.
Here.
I've missed
Ahoy.
you.
I'm not sure that quite hit, but whatever. Fucking everything.
It hit for me.
Hi.
Maybe it's because I've been drinking, though. So anyway, on April 19th, under the cover of darkness, an amphibious attack began with the aid of naval bombardment. So, like, they have a sneaky, like, group of, like, Marines, but really shitty Marines going to land, but they're also just firebombing the fuck out of the city. And, or not the city, but the
What
fort.
you guys doing? Guessing.
Yeah, and as the British fought their way towards the fort's ramparts, they discovered the Spanish had dug deep ditches. And so from here, we're going to be quoting from warhistoryonline.com. Quote, after landing the previous day, the poorly planned assault on Fort Lazaro began at 4 a.m. A group of Americans was in charge of carrying ladders to climb
First
the walls
light.
and wool to fill in the trenches around the fort. I don't know how that would help, but whatever.
Wait, say what? Ladders and
Ladders
wool?
to climb the wall and wool to fill the trench around the fort. However, the attacking force was misled by a couple
So when
of...
your boys fall off the ladders, they don't die? I don't...
Yeah, I don't get it either.
Pads.
It makes sense.
Sounds like pads.
Yeah,
Sounds
yeah.
like climbing.
However, the attacking force was misled by a couple of Spanish deserters who claimed to be leading them to a weak point in the walls. As a result, the British column was greeted with a close-range volley of lethal effect. Most of the unarmed Americans dropped their ladders and ran. Again, Native Americans and people of that sort dropped their ladders and ran. However, this did not matter much since the operation was so badly thought out that their ladders were too short for the walls anyway. As the sun rose, the remaining British soldiers were subjected to cannon bombardment from the fort and the nearby city of Cartagena. When the Spaniards sallied forth, the British had to retreat or risk being cut off. Ultimately, by the end of the siege, the British had suffered around 18,000 casualties, mostly from disease, and the Spanish had suffered around 2,000, end quote.
All right, real question though. Like,
Oh my fuck.
were those double cross? Double cross?
Yeah, there was a portion of double cross there.
So
right?
that
Yeah.
was the very first secret squirrels, right? Those are the fucking
What?
secret squirrels.
Secret. I don't know what the secret squirrels are.
Oh, the whole like fucking like double crossing secret agent fucking bullshit.
Well, no, there was actually a bunch of double agentry going on beforehand, but this was,
right.
This is an important part of that, because this is not Benedict Arnold level, which is going to happen in about, I think, 60 years from now, but it's still a big espionage. Like, it's an intelligence
Man, you can't...
problem.
It was a power play. at
It
the
really
very
was,
least.
yeah.
You
Look,
know, it turned the tables.
Yeah.
Everything in espionage has to do with trust. Like, there are no photographs. There are no recordings. There's just what your spy said happened. There was so much more ability to double cross and to play both sides. But seriously, the Spanish just led those English idiots right into a fucking trap.
Right into
Yeah,
it.
to their deaths.
Well, and
Not even like I guess it's technically a double cross, but it's like,
it is a double cross. But what I do like about this...
how did you fall for that?
What I do like about this quote is that they use the term Americans as to like the true definition of it. They're like the Americans, which is a bunch of like, native Aztec people. It's a bunch of people from like the Caribbean. Yeah, well, they're slaves, yeah, but they are the genuine Americans.
They weren't slaves until
Well, I'm sure
No,
they
I'm
were
saying
slaves
probably
getting into it.
in this
but,
instance, they're
but their
slaves.
ethnicity was properly described as American, which is vague as shit. So that's not better, but they are the
of
first
the
Americans.
They're
Americans.
actually Americans.
They are Americans.
I'm just glad they didn't use the term savages. Like that's all.
They
feel
did a
good
lot.
about.
Yeah, like for being woke enough to have people in your military, which isn't that woke, they still probably called these people the N-word and any other racist term that they could for
Yeah,
who
I'm
they
sure
are.
they had
Like,
some very interesting terminology
Wow.
for
Yeah.
It's
not a kind of era, you know what I mean? So, having scuttled ships at the port, bay, and channels, Lezo effectively kept all of fucking Admiral Vernon's ships, Eddie Vernon, from entering into his port. After several failed attempts at more ground assaults and with supplies running low, the British sat for a month in the bay. Excuse me. All the while,
Have the men go to third rations. We'll sit here for 20 days.
yeah, all the while,
asshole.
yellow fever just spread like wildfire throughout these
Dick
ships,
Nose
killing
eating.
more and more soldiers. Eventually, on May 8th, Admiral Vernon was forced to lift the siege and return to Jamaica. The Battle of Cartagena goes down in history as one of the most embarrassing defeats of the British Empire. So dude literally went there with something like 27,000 people against more or less 2,000. I think it's 2,000 or 4,000, one of those two numbers. But he had such the advantage.
Spanish didn't lose.
Would you say he
half
had a
their
seizure?
number. I feel like
A seizure?
I feel like a lot of the
He definitely
Spanish
flailed.
losses are just like civilians. They're not actually like military.
Yeah, from like bombing the
personnel.
city and stuff. Yeah,
Right.
yeah. It's
Whereas all the British losses are military personnel.
yeah, and so like one thing that should be noted is that I don't know if Admiral Vernon ever got revenge for Jenkins' ear, which at this point was most likely not even on the radar. Like nobody cared about this anymore.
Nobody even gave a shit about Jenkins to begin with. That's
They
why he was
did
a
not.
privateer.
Yeah, and so Vernon, determined to continue fucking up the Spanish, he made his way over to Guantanamo Bay in Cuba, where he successfully fought off the Spaniards there. He would end up being replaced shortly after this victory. However, he went on to have an active role in Parliament. Eventually, the War of Jenkins' Ear made its way into the Chilean coast, Manila, the British colonial coasts like Florida and Georgia, but it eventually just like kind of died out and merged into a bigger war, a bigger, wider war, and that was the War of Austrian Succession. Nearly every European nation became involved in the war between Prussia and Austria, who were fighting over a chunk of land called Silesia. Might get that wrong. Silesia.
Some sleazy land.
Silesia. Silesia. I don't know. Sam, what do you think? Silesia?
Silesia?
Yeah, it's something like that.
Why not? Fuck it.
And with Admiral Vernon having weakened the British naval forces significantly with his battles in the Caribbean, as well as eventually being attacked in Guantanamo by the Spanish, the return of his fleet in 1742 marked the official end of the major battles of the War of Jenkins' Ear. With France entering the War of Austrian Succession in 1744 and attempting a British invasion, the fleet was like really needed back home. And this persuaded the British government to kind of keep their defenses at home, and they decided not to focus too much on the Americas, which is a shame, because it's probably what helped the good old US of A claim independence, baby!
Well, no, it for sure is.
Yeah.
Like, the British government withdrew a significant chunk of their military forces and then started drawing very heavily on the resources of their colonies.
Yeah.
And
Which everybody was like, nah.
Right, exactly. They're like, no taxation without representation.
Yeah. And so,
But again, Europe had been waging war with itself for 200 years, basically almost without stop.
yeah. And it
Fucking so gnarly.
and it's just amazing that like
I'm king. No, I'm king.
Well,
Fuck you.
and I find it really amazing that like this is
Good job, you guys.
this is where we're gonna end tonight's episode about the War of Jenkins' Ear. But I do want to say that like it's amazing to me that there was this, as I mentioned earlier, this Franz Ferdinand, this Archduke that got harmed and was basically used as a focal point to create an entire war. And again, this war decimated the indigenous people there over some dude's fucking ear.
Can you say
Pride?
the World Trade Center? Welcome to the last 18 years of our lives.
Yeah, for real.
Right. That's not new,
No.
and it will be used again.
And we're going to get into that a little bit in our next episode. But for tonight, how do you guys feel about the War of Jenkins' Ear? Do you feel like justice was served?
Piece of shit, fucking Vietnam all over again.
So, Ron, Sean, do you guys feel like justice was served?
Shawn, you go first. Man.
You can't even say that without going through puberty.
I'm just imagining the ear, and I don't mean the ear that was maybe presented or not. I mean his actual ear. Because if there's even a stipulation that the ear was missing, that's what I'm wondering about. Did he show up to the government and he was like, "Yo, look,
Hung up
You
on
lost
the
it
ear?
gambling?
look at my ear." And they're like, "We need to see it." And he's like, "Ah, shit. I'll be right back." Ran to a ship, cut a slave's ear off, came back in,
That's what I imagine happening.
False flag!
He's not gonna,
False flag!
He's not going to keep his ear in a jar for fucking 8 years.
If there had been an Alex Jones then,
oh, yeah.
he would have been screaming false flag.
False flag the entire way.
Man, I'm not saying it's the root of all propaganda, but like it's a fucking good place to start. That's for goddamn
Yeah,
sure.
and
fucking start a war over a
some
fucking loss of
some
somebody's
selfish asshole. It was like, "Oh, but I got an
Dude,
ear thing," and
Propaganda's older than tools.
then
That's probably true.
I want to argue with you about that, but I don't know.
Being
You're
like,
I don't know enough about it. Yeah. So, what are your thoughts, Sean?
I'm just curious at how he presented it in reality. Of like, maybe he actually had like an ear deformity, and he was just like, "Oh, fuck, they're mean," and
Or
it
a
was
rope
just
cut it off or some dumb shit.
or whatever,
Yeah.
some stupid shit, and that he was just like, "You know what? They really made me upset back then. I'm gonna tell the queen or whatever. Fucking man, they took my ear."
King,
So,
but, yeah.
and then they started a whole fucking war, and it was like, I just imagine later he's like, "Whoa, that went a lot further."
Alex
than I
Jones would
thought."
call it a what's it called, a black flag operation or a black ops operation, where it's like, it didn't really happen. They're trying to steal your guns.
I just
Sandy
wanted-
Hook never happened.
I just wanted him to
flag.
acknowledge
False
they were
flag, thank you. Yeah,
they
yeah.
were mean to me, but I didn't mean to start
Black
the
flag.
war. Like,
Yeah, and so
No,
I feel like
it-
if they would have talked to Jenkins later and they're like, you started a whole war, he's like, I didn't do that.
Well, the funny bit is that the thing didn't even get called or named the War of Jenkins Ear until
like 100
fucking
years later.
1800s.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
1820
So
something.
he's hanging out with his buddies and he's like, yeah, it went a little further than I thought.
No, I mean, really,
Justification. Yeah,
the
what the fuck?
opposition party heard about this thing that happened with one of their state-sanctioned pirates, i.e., a privateer, and they realized they could use it to their political advantage, and that's exactly what they fucking did.
yeah,
And
and
it went way far.
No, it went exactly as far. No, that's
they just
like,
needed that to create forward
none
momentum
of the
politically.
War of Jenkins
Sure.
Ear
For
was
sure.
like, oh
Yeah,
my
yeah.
god, we lost control of Admiral fucking Vernon. No, Admiral Vernon was a fucking like an aristocrat. He was a rich person's son.
I would have cut Jenkins' ear off as well.
Yeah, I'd have just
Fuck
fucking-
Jenkins.
Well, and one thing I want to address is
I'd
that
have taken him as a hostage.
Little son of a...
so they use like some verbiage. I'm gonna try to scroll to real quick.
Verbiage.
Yeah, verbiage.
verbiage.
And
Verbiage.
it's
The greener version of verbs.
at some point in the journal, I can't find it here at the moment, but in the journal they talk about using him, in an unholy way,
Oh, I could... Yeah.
and I don't know what that means specifically.
Yo,
But it
Jenkins,
sounds like they
my
sodomized him.
Yo,
cut
Jenkins,
his
you're
ear
our
off.
catalyst to this war.
Yeah,
You will abide.
yeah. And
And
so
he was like, wait, I don't want to go this far. And they're like, oh, it's going
No.
that far.
yeah. There's no evidence of what I'm saying,
but-
but speculation would have me believe.
They caught him
But
in
the-
the shower
the-
room and they're like, yo, this is how it's going to go down. You better comply.
But a hideous way, I think, is the way that it's.
So
it's
listen,
used.
abused, used are basically the same word. And if you go back 100 years, those could have been interchangeable with each other.
Yeah.
So like they abused him in an unholy way. In a very, very religious society, doesn't mean sodomy. It means
It doesn't,
like,
and I don't know that it does mean that.
It means
Ears.
It means that somebody was trying to describe the event in a way that would make people who didn't really give a shit about pirates upset
Yeah.
about the treatment of a human,
Yeah.
of a Christian,
Yeah, and again, I
of
don't
a white man.
I don't know
Right.
what happened
no,
there.
But seriously, it's like,
Yeah,
Could
dude,
you say that the entire British Navy got verninated? Fuck! The Verninator? Fuck!
No,
Fuck!
They definitely got
right.
Verninated by our buddy Admiral Eddie Vernon.
Edward.
The reason that I think tonight it's important to talk about this is because all this is happening and all this fighting is and what I really want to address is this is actually setting up our next episode for next week. Next week we're going to be talking about like Cuba's history and Guantanamo Bay, and like the reason I kind of picked the subject is because I don't know why Guantanamo Bay, being a Cuban owned land piece, is owned by the Americans, and there's something illegal about it from what I understand, but again, my understanding of it at the moment of this recording is very surface type. And so what we're doing tonight is kind of leading up to the history of the Caribbean, because next week we're going to be taking on the history of the Caribbean and just kind of how Cuba was affected.
I feel like next week's going to be very debatable.
I'm going to talk about the legitimate. We're going to talk about the legitimate history of it, and I don't know about the debatability of it because I'm going to try to be as authentic as I can as a historian.
By debatability, I mean I'm going to argue with you a lot.
Oh yeah. Let's argue a lot about it.
I feel like it's gonna. Let me take back debatable and say argumentative.
So are you excited about arguing next week?
Yes.
Cool. And how,
So much arguing. You
since we're
listeners are in for a real treat.
Yeah,
a real treat.
So since we're at the end of the episode, Ron, how do you feel about what you've heard? Did you like the story that you heard tonight?
It was an interesting story for sure, but I
didn't like it.
No, I came in and I'm leaving more depressed than I was when I was.
That's kind of the point of the episode.
That'll happen pretty much anytime you hear about what people have done.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, people are shit, obviously.
Yeah, it's I try to leave people like a little bit angry and a little bit depressed because I think it's a good balance where you're like, that was a fun story, but why do I care about this more? Shawn, what do you feel about tonight's episode, producer man? Cool. Sam?
It was late in November. The stormy seas were upon us.
Is this going to lead to anything pertinent, or should I just skip over it? So it's
Admiral
been a great episode. I have been
had just came upon a most perfect plan.
Well, yeah, I want to thank you guys for listening to this story tonight. You guys at home as well. You can find us on Facebook and YouTube, and that's kind of it.
That's it
for the time being. But it's been a lot of fun kind of discovering the roots of our next story. And the War of Jenkins Ear was just such a funny name of a battle, of a war, that I just really had to dig my teeth into it.
I mean, you know how we have hurricanes?
Indeed.
And we just pick a name for them?
Yep.
That was Europe.
That's what happened here.
Fuck, those motherfuckers had fights so goddamn often. They were like, what are we naming this one?
The Battle of the Right Hook.
Fuck it. What was that guy? The guy that got his ear cut off? The pirate that...
You mean the
privateer
dude we cut his ear
that
off?
got his ear cut?
Yeah.
Yeah, that guy. Let's call it that.
Hell yeah. So tonight's been fun. Do you guys have any final thoughts before we exit?
Or Irene.
Sounds like no. Well, thank you, Ron, for joining us again. I hope you've had a pleasing, if not disturbing time. And Mr. Sam, thank you for joining us with your naval intelligence.
Get out of
here. It is
here.
well respected.
I don't work for naval intelligence.
And,
you can't prove that.
And producer man and quiet man, Shawn.
Nope.
You're doing well. I appreciate all the hard work you do. And as you guys at home know, I am your host, Loren O'Brien, and this has been Black Sheep and Bad Apples.
They don't know that.
Thank you guys for listening to us.